Since we just had earlier this week celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, I just ran across a piece by our beloved Dr. Hasan Johnson talking about Dr. King. So I was reading through it, and even though it's like 3 years old, I kind of liked it. So I'm going to read this into the record. I'm going to leave the link in the description for you to go read the brother's work. Reflections on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. by Hasan Johnson, PhD. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And that's from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was at one point the most hated man in America, despite how he has been recast in the public imagination. I posted this piece just to point out that despite his greatness, he was still a black male and still seen as a threat. According to Democracy Now!, it was 50 years ago today that FBI director and founder J. Edgar Hoover made headlines by calling Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King the most notorious liar in the country. But this perspective wasn't limited to the establishment, but a good portion of the populace. Slate.com cites a Gallup survey detailing the hatred. A letter sent to King via one of Hoover's deputies, William Sullivan, would threaten to expose King's infidelities. In America's outdated Victorian-era moral politics, somehow his sexual exploits invalidate the veracity of his political assertions, and a lifelong amount of activism working to bring justice to millions of oppressed people. Here King is subject to stereotypes, already popular for black males, hypersexuality. And although these assertions against King may be true, it is especially effective in dismantling King's validity in many people's eyes, simply because as a black man, sexual veracity is not only unscrupulous, but potentially violent. Such negativity makes King a degenerate and a potential rapist, but only because of centuries-old controlling images that suggest that at his core, all black men are essentially so. King has earned his respect, and the only people that should be able to dismiss him should be his family. Nevertheless, alongside the sexual racist attack on King, there is evidence to suggest that King was assassinated with the assistance of the United States government. Coretta King, wife of the slain activist, said, "There is abundant evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband, Martin Luther King, and the civil court's unanimous verdict has validated our belief. I wholeheartedly applaud the verdict of the jury, and I feel that justice has been well served in their deliberations. The verdict is not only a great victory for my family, but also a great victory for America. It is a great victory for truth itself. It is important to know that this was a swift verdict, delivered after about an hour of jury deliberation. The jury was clearly convinced by the extensive evidence that was presented during the trial that, in addition to Mr. Jowers, the conspiracy of the mafia, local, state, and federal government agencies were deeply involved in the assassination of my husband. The jury also affirmed overwhelming evidence that identified someone else, not James Earl Ray, as the shooter, and that Mr. Ray was set up to take the blame. I want to make it clear that my family has no interest in retribution. Instead, our sole concern has been that the full truth of the assassination has been revealed and adjudicated in a court of law." You can go on and read the rest. In other words, unchecked black masculinity is a threat to the state, especially from the man leading to a national poor people's campaign which sought to unite poor black, Latino, and white workers. Thus, even his death is fraught with controversy. Judge Joe Brown weighed in recently, arguing that he almost judged the case. It purports that James Earl Ray was part of the conspiracy, but not necessarily the shooter. Part of the reason he was assassinated was because he began to sound too much like his ideological opponent, Malcolm X, who was assassinated 5 years prior to his own death, just as he would start pushing for reparations. Unchecked black masculinity is a threat because when linked to an emphasis on intelligence and historical awareness, the resulting rage cannot be rationally opposed. If articulated to the world court, otherwise known as United Nations, as Malcolm sought to do, it could only condemn America's treatment of the Black community. That is, unless the U.S. successfully bullied or bought off enough countries to curtail international support for Malcolm. This is ultimately why such masculinities have been sought out for elimination. Culturally, intellectually, academically, conventionally, and otherwise, politicized radical Black masculinities of all sexual practices have been cautiously opposed and dissuaded. Even gay Black men are only depicted in media as being hypersexual and humorously effeminate, but never politically conscious. Even in the media industry, the manufacturing engine and arbiter for which ideas are generally considered worthy of general consideration, unchecked Black masculinity is feared and unwelcome. Chris Rock states this unequivocally in his letter regarding racism in Hollywood. They don't really hire Black men. A Black man has bass in his voice and maybe a little hint of facial hair. Not going to happen. I humbly ask that if you are a Black male, that you develop your voice and allow your anger and injustice to be unchecked, untempered, and unapologetic. There have been far too many who have sacrificed for it to be so, least of all which is Dr. Martin Luther King. Rest in power, sir. You are appreciated. And that is the 2016 article by Dr. T. Hasan Johnson talking about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and how bold Black voices that have led to this country going all the way back to even Crispus Attucks have been looked at with fear, anger, and distrust and contempt, but they have always pushed this nation forward. Our esteemed Cerulean Gray always says that men oppose the environment, and Black men have always morally opposed the unjust environment that has been America from its very founding, and maybe even Western civilization going all the way back to the Romans. It's always been said that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and the only time that our Black voices, our Black giants are loved is long after they're dead. Even the master blaster himself, Bob Marley, and when he said, "How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand around and look?" Now they call Black male masculinity toxic because it's powerful, because it's feared. Even our own women fear Black male power as they try to tamp it down. All I can say is, brothers, don't lose your manly pride. Get yourself in gear and keep your stride. Take it from me, one day we'll all be free. As Donny Hathaway so eloquently wrote, and it is still true. With that, I'm going to jump off of here. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.